Hello everyone, this is the Underdoll, and I'm covering an article from Kotaku, and I've not read it, but I know this is probably gonna be good, because the headline says, the cost of being a woman who covers video games. Written today, January 4th, 2020. Now that it's 2020, I keep thinking about how it felt to be a woman writing about gender in video games back in 2010. Well, isn't that just neat? Why was it bad 10 years ago? So, 10 years ago, the gender imbalance in the video game industry was not seen as a problem to be solved as much as a mundane, largely unquestioned reality. It was not common for notable women who worked in the game industry to be fetishized, harassed, or both. Okay, let's actually see at the citation. Oh, it's just an image from Jade Raymond. Okay. So you have one image of if something exists, there's gonna be some nudity of it somewhere on the internet. I'm just saying, Rule 32, isn't that what it's called? In 2007, game designer Kathy Sierra gave up her career and left public life after being harassed and threatened online. At the time, the incident was considered somewhat unusual, but it wasn't clocked as a portent of what Sierra described in 2004 Wired editorial as the slow, steady increase of both frequency and horror of online harassment. Just get off Twitter. Get off Twitter. That's the solution. And if there are death threats, go to the police. Weren't about women and were because Pew Research has debunked this, and men are more likely to be harassed and get more harassment than men. So this narrative is bullcrap. And we're pretty limited to portraying a certain type of gruff macho man power fantasy. Call of Duty's multiplayer had no female character option until 2013. Yeah, and how many men are there in war? This is literally a first world problem. So you couldn't play as a woman in Call of Duty. Boo hoo! Play a different game. You could play an MMO RPG and play as a woman, an elf, a troll, whatever. But despite proclaiming it depicted Modern Warfare, yeah, well, there are almost no women on the front lines, as far as I'm aware. In military, just saying, modern and warfare in general has never depicted women on the front lines generally. There are a few exceptions, but pretty much. Halo Reach, which came out in September 2010, included the option to at last play as either a female or male Spartan. Though the game didn't change based on this decision, some role-playing games of the era like Mass Effect allowed you to play as either a man or a woman, as well as and although these games also featured no significant change to the story, if you did so, they were nonetheless heralded as the most progressive options of the time. The best known, they've done this for decades now. They did it in the noughts. They did it in the 90s. The best known games of that era forced you to play as a woman were a gender swat of more famous fictional men, e.g. Lara Croft being a sexy lady version of Indiana Jones, Joanna Dark being a sexy lady version of James Bond. The short list of exceptions to all of this, such as the character Jane in Beyond Good and Evil, were held up as proof that the game had more than enough options for what assumed to be a tiny minority of women who had any interest in playing them. Well, most gamers are men. I'm sorry to break it to you. So the larger portion of the audience like to play as them, at least. Well, there are of course men that like to play as women in, let's say, MMORPGs or RPGs in general. But for the most part, when I play, let's say, Dragon Age or something like that, an RPG, especially where I can choose, I choose a man because it's basically I see myself in the situation and want to play. Usually, that's how I play the game. Games were for straight men and gaming websites were too. So let's erase the lesbians, yeah, and gay men. Let's erase them too. Outlets like IGN, Spike, and UGO regularly featured ranked lists of the most attractive fictional female characters in games. Oh, you have made articles on Street Fighter and characters on how hot they were. You are goddamn hypocrites, Kotaku. You are hypocrites. IGN did the same thing with real life women too. Yeah, because most of their readers are men. So they get clicks, supply, and demand. Even at gaming websites that were trying for something more serious than the usual enthusiast press standards, analyzing games' portrayal of gender and sexuality still wasn't common. These gaming sites too were staffed predominantly by white, straight, cisgender men, often of similar middle to upper class financial backgrounds. Okay. Why does their characteristics matter instead of what their actual characters are? Isn't that extremely bigoted, Kotaku? Again, none of this was considered strange or even remarkable. After all, that was the subsection of people to whom video games had been marketed since the 1990s, as laid out in a stellar reported timeline written by Tracy Lean for Polygon in 2013. Market research had created a chicken and egg situation after finding that more boys than girls played video games in the 80s and 90s. Because of that, advertisers focused marketing games to boys, thereby ensuring that gaming would get socially coded as masculine pursuit in the decades to follow. But still, today we have never had more options, and still we have more boys, more men interested in games. You have every opportunity. You can play them on your phone. You can play them anywhere you want. But most men play games and call themselves gamers. Women just casually play like Candy Crush or something like that and don't call themselves gamers. It's not a chicken in the egg thing. It's biology. It's choice. There are, of course, plenty of female gamers, and props to them. If you like gaming, you're welcome in this sphere, but don't make it like it's entitlement. Women have to. I think that's extremely sexist to take choice from women and refuse them their own agency because of a demographic percentage. They want equity, not choice. It made sense then that the most successful and well-known people who were writing about video games were the people whom video games had been marketed to cater toward in the decades prior. In 2020, this is an astoundingly boring observation. In 2010, pointing this out was seen as bizarre, worthy of mockery, harassment, and even threats. Yeah, citation needed. I can believe mockery, but I need a specific instance of this. You can't just make a claim, an assertion like that without pointing to some sort of incident. Of course, lots of different kinds of people have always played video games. In the 2000s, indie game development and indie games criticism scenes were growing. The rise of blogging platforms like WordPress, the early days of YouTube, and the rise of social media made it possible for marginalized gamers to find one another and have the kinds of discussions mainstream sites of games weren't. By 2010, websites like Feminist Gamers, the Border House blog, Sexy Video Game Land, and Shakesville, a feminist blog that covered games sometimes, were helped by critics who weren't straight or white or men. This is what it's all about. You want just the feminist perspective, the feminist gaze, so to speak, to cover games because you say so, because men are bad, okay? This is the only argument you're putting forth so far, and it's getting really tiresome. Straight white male are bad, women good. Sometimes these blogs tackle complex social issues, and no one else does. This is basically what you're saying as well. But they also wrote more mundane impressions of games they played. For me, these sites normalize the idea of different kinds of people play and enjoy games, despite what marketing had told me and so many other people for so long. But why aren't they mainstream sites now? They are niche sites. If you what you're saying is that these sites were so important, why aren't they mainstream now? I've never heard of these sites, ever. Back then, I didn't know very many women in real life who played video games, let alone the ones who wrote about games for a living, so the existence of these blogs made me realize I wasn't alone, and that if I wanted to write about social issues in games, there would be other people out there who would care. Unfortunately, all of the above are now defunct, and most of them have deleted their archives. Critical Distance, which started in 2009 and still exists, still runs a weekly roundup of the best video game posts from blogs all over the internet. Its archives show of years of critical debates about games, which some of which feel thankfully dated. When mainstream sites try to tackle topics that were commonplace in indie spaces, especially in the ways games frame gender roles, yeah, of course, we have to tackle gender roles, God forbid. Even though you have when Patricia Hernandez talks about the abs of Ryu, there seems to be no issue about gender roles and sexuality, or even God of War, or how men are portrayed in game. That's completely okay, but men are portrayed as sexy, women most affected. That's basically what this is. The response was often an angry blowback from readers. Take, for example, Abby Happy's review of Metroid Other M, published at G4 on August 31st, 2010. Most of other reviews of that game at the time were neutral to positive, with some complaints about the controls and linear design. In addition to voicing those complaints, Happy's review raised several issues with the narrative and structure of the game, specifically its gender politics. Yeah, see, this is why people have an issue with the review. You make the review political. This is why people have issues with reviewers putting in identity politics into reviews that are supposed to be objective about the game itself, not its politics. This is why this argument is such garbage. Which put the ordinary self-assured and independent bounty hunter Samus Aran under the thumb of a male military commander and inexplicably reduced her to a childlike state of fear during a confrontation with Ridley, a frequent Metroid enemy whom Samus had bested several times before. Happy explained how in Metroid Other M, Samus gets restricted from using her abilities, which some could open a path or save her life in the future, until a bland male character dictates it to her. So she does this because she likes him, but only as a friend. No matter what way you rationalize this mechanic, when you're 10 minutes into the lava sector and you can't use your Varia suit, and you will understand how painful and stupid this plot device is. Happy also lamented the poor writing of Samus Aran's dialogue. Samus uses the phrase "confession time" like a 12-year-old girl scrawling in her Lisa Frank diary, but really the Alan Wake meets a Lifetime Channel original movie narration gets old faster than you can say daddy issues. Yeah, what does this have to do? This is just a rambling and having pet peeves with the game instead of actually reviewing the game. Happy gave the game an overall 2 out of 5. I don't really care if you put something like this into a review. I wouldn't care to be lectured by a feminist on how the game is supposed to portray a character. I wouldn't care what you have to say, even if the rest of the review is stellar. In 2019, if you ask any Metroid fan about the portrayal of Samus in Other M, they'll likely dismiss the game as a sexist. Okay. As a sexist disappointment that did its protagonist wrong, that's a pretty large assertion that any fan they'll dismiss. Sorry, I misunderstood. They'll likely dismiss the game as a sexist disappointment that its protagonist won, but that wasn't the dominant opinion when Happy's review first came out. In a post titled "The Backlash," the Brainy Gamer blog describes. So you have one other outlet basically saying this, and that was somehow a good thing. So two people claimed it was sexist, and that makes it sexist. Okay. A blog described the outcry against review immense and personal, then included several examples of Happy had received like these gems. The female reviewer turned it into her opportunity to let loose her feminist and anti-sexism views about the story, said very little about the actual gameplay, graphics, and all things that really matter when playing a video game. That's exactly what I'm saying here. What does this have to do with the actual game? It has nothing to do with the game at all. Why are you reviewing a game if all you're doing is lecturing and putting in politics when it has no place for that in a review? I'm not even a Metroid fan. I just think they should have a better criteria to rating games. Maybe they shouldn't be reviewing games during the time of the month. Oh wow, it's not empowering to women anymore. Wow, who are video games like Metroid made for boys? This isn't Cooking Mama. Brainy Games post characterized this backlash as an example of what happens when a writer for a high-profile outlet chooses to address game critically. No. He went a little bit edgy, who wrote this article, but I agree with what this person is saying, because how you describe the review itself, you basically forced feminist views and gender identity politics into a review that has no. It doesn't belong there. As simple as that. Do you not want journalism 101? When you're reviewing something, it's supposed to be objective. But I guess that's too much to ask for. We're in current year after all, and these so-called hack journalists don't even know what they're supposed to do as a journalist. I mean, when he or she functions as a critic of simply a reviewer in the early 2010s, as evidenced by the comments on Happy's review, the idea persisted that games reviews, especially those with scores, were meant to be technically focused by his guides. The idea of analyzing a game's themes and tones, especially using any form of feminist analysis, was considered by the types of people who hated Happy's review to be irrelevant and definitely not something that should impact a game score. Yeah, it shouldn't. Make an essay. Make something completely different, but don't claim to be a review. It's as simple as that. The rhetorical division played into generations of gender-based stereotypes that see objectivity as inherently masculine. Criticism of a game's tone and narrative was seen as more subjective and therefore intrinsically based, as well as more feminine. In other words, criticizing a game on feminist grounds was something girly feeling crap that would not stand in the wall of gaming technical pursuit for technical man. I don't even know where to begin with this paragraph. So, what if men did, let's say, the men's rights activist, or a Muslim type of review, or a Christian type of review? You would be screeching and claiming sexism all over the place. But if it's a feminist perspective, that's completely okay. Because when reviewing a game, again, I can't understand why I'm saying this to an adult and a so-called journalist. You're supposed to review the technical aspects of the game and review it on its graphics, its sound, voice acting, story, gameplay, presentation, if there are glitches, online, etc., etc. Single player, co-op, whatever the game includes. Many of the comments Hop received back then expressed sentiments that would be and still are repeated time and time again to marginalized critics who analyze social issues, games, silly feminists, and their emotions getting in the way of professionalism. This is exactly what this article is. Heading into the 2010s, feminists were seen as boring killjoy outsiders to gaming who couldn't possibly understand it, similar to your parents or Jack Thompson. Yeah, you want to censor games, and your feminist icon, Adida Sarkeesian, perfect character is a blank slate which you can't even see what it actually is. That's what you are. You are killjoys every time there's a game. Let's just look at Jedi Fallen Order. The outrage of that being announced and having a white male protagonist. people like you got outraged because it had a said male in the on the cover and as the main protagonist of the game. You are such hypocrites. That same month, August of 2010, a different controversy was unfolding in gaming. On August 11, the Penny Arcade webcomic put up a strip in which video game hero decides not to bother helping out a non-player character. And despite the character's pleas that every night we are raped to sleep by dick wolves, Shakespeare guest blogger Shaker Millie published a post about the strip, admitting to generally enjoying the dark humor of Penny Arcade, but not being a fan of the strip in particular, which they felt made light of rape and was another example of how rape victims are often doubted, mocked, and insulted openly. Yeah, because this is exactly the why you are killjoys. You can't even joke about things anymore, because joking about terrible things is apparently haram. Oh my god, I swear, these people, they are joyless harpies, especially the feminists. Back then, gamers used the word rape casually all the time as a synonym for defeat. Okay. It's fallen out of fashion so much over the course of the past years that it's hard to imagine how often people used to say it. I still say when I game, just to piss people like you off. In 2012, former Kotaku deputy editor Patricia Hernandez wrote about having once used the term herself and her reservations about it. The Penny Arcade strip and Shakespeare response to it became the flashpoint of what grew into a years-long debate over rape jokes, and by extension, the casual use of the word rape in video game spaces. No, you want your sort of narrative and any other sort of discussion around it and jokes to be censored. That's what you want. But you use very selective wording to do this. Penny Arcade followed up with a second strip featuring the authors and artist stand-ins characters joking directly about the idea that anyone would become a rapist just from reading the comic. Yeah. If you're raping someone right now, stop, they told the reader. On October 6th, 2010, the site started selling Dick Wolf themed merchandise. After much criticism, they pulled the merchandise from the store on January 26th, 2011. It wasn't until September 5th, 2013 that Penny Arcade published what could be very generously to be constructed as an apology by the comics artist Mike Krahulik. Yeah, but you don't even accept the apology. This is why you should never apologize to these people. And in which he expressed regret for everything we did after that comic, while standing by the original comic, and it's a joke. If we had just stopped with the strip and moved on, the Dick Wolf never would have become what it is today, which is a joke and an extent of rape victims or a symbol of the dismissal of people who have suffered a sexual assault. The most disturbing aspect of the Dick Wolf controversy was the amount of harassment spewed at people who had expressed discomfort at the original strip and the proliferation of the word rape as a slang term among gamers. This type of organized harassment against perceived enemies of the sanctity... Oh my god. They seriously used the word sanctity of gaming was a trend that would continue through the 2010s. In February 2012, an old 2006 interview with BioWare senior writer Jennifer Happler began making the rounds on Reddit. Happler, who wrote multiple Dragon Age games, had suggested that games could be more inclusive by giving players the option to fast forward through the combat the way. Yeah, what's I remember this controversy. What's even the point of having combat in such a game? You just want to have a movie. And this is why BioWare has become garbage. When the interview resurfaced, users on social media began harassing Happler. Could you give us some examples at least? With many echoing the original Reddit post, claimed that she was the cancer that is killing BioWare. Basically, The suggestion was that a focus on narrative at the expense of combat would ruin BioWare games, a statement that is all the more tragicomic in BioWare's current post-Anthem era. This harassment played into the false gender dichotomy that positioned women only care about video game stories. No, you're making that assertion. Oh my god. Oh my god. It's journalists like you that make it gendered for no apparent reason, and just because she's a woman doesn't even mean that this is a reason. Her statement does this for her. Oh my god. While men, the real gamers, care about... you're trying to use the no true Scotsman's fallacy when no one is using that fallacy. Care about what's really important, which is combat. No, again, who is making this argument? They're talking about BioWare games. This debate blew up further into arguments about whether games that don't have combat are truly games at all. Later in August of 2013, Hepler left her job at BioWare after receiving violent threats against her family. Let's see. Do we actually have... let's look at the link that she shared. And after going through the article... let's actually read the update. Jennifer Helper, is it Hepler or Helper? I think it's Hepler. It's a typo. Jennifer Hepler has contacted us to make it clear that she did not leave BioWare as a direct result of the harassment that she received at the hands of gamers. BioWare were tremendously supportive of me during that time, and I've experienced nothing like it since. Due to the excellent policing of the BioWare forums and new policies on the BioWare social network, she told us in an email, I'm moving on from BioWare now to pursue other opportunities that let me return to be closer to family in the United States. After a wonderful 8 years in Canada, I have no intentions to leave the game industry. I love the work that I have done and the reactions from the vast majority of fans, and I look forward to continuing that work in other venues. Journalism 101. Actually read the citations you used in your own article. Unbelievable. The idea of real gamers also played out in gaming community themselves. Even women who played competitive games at a high level still struggle to be respected as equals. Yeah, because there are no women at high level competitive gaming as of now. If I don't know any. If you can point me out to a high level competitive female gamer, I love to be wrong about this, but I don't know any. In February 2012, Capcom put out a reality show featuring Street Fighters and Tekken players facing off as part of a promotion for the company's new mashup game fighting Street Fighter X Tekken. The show is now remembered for featuring an incident involving the head of the team of Tekken players, Aris Bactinians, sexually harassing a female player. Bactinians defended himself at the time, saying the sexual harassment is part of the culture. If you remove that from the fighting game community, it's not the fighting game community. There's esports for people who like esports, and there's fighting games for people who like spicy food and like to have fun. If you can't handle the banter, I'm sure he said this exact same thing to male competitors, but because it's women, you cover this. That's basically what I'm reading between the lines here. But Tinian's statement got some pushback. Of course, he got some pushback. But it was also often misunderstood by people who didn't have the full context of the social divide between the fighting game community and the rest of esports. The fighting game scene has historically been more racially diverse than other esports scenes. While most of esports is Asian and white players, in the fighting game community it's just as common to see black and Latinx. Wow. Well, competitors reaching the top ranks, as well as running tournaments and becoming professional commentators and casters. The fighting game community is proud of what makes it different. Bactinian's choice to rhetorically capitalize on this very real social divide in order to justify harassing a female player was a manipulation that did a massive disservice to the fighting game competitive scene, as well as the women who have competed in it. That's your assertion. Why don't women in that community speak for themselves? I'm just saying. His behavior and comments suggested that, of course, it should suggested something, that women needed to put up with her harassment not only to be real fighting game players. Again, who is making this argument? You're making a straw man argument and using the no true Scotsman's fallacy to back up your made up argument against this guy. And this is years after the fact he said this. I'm very sure he has some, he grew up and matured and has other perspective and opinions on this, but this is what Kotaku is garbage. But to maintain the authenticity of the scene, it's a disservice that is still being repaired to this day. Yeah, according to you. At EVO 2019, long-time female participants in the fighting scene, game scene, spoke out about wanting to be heard and respected. You only get heard and respected when you deserve it. I'm sorry, that's how it works. When they describe the harassment they face at competitive events and how hard they still have to fight to get that respect, win matches. On May 17th, 2012, of course, now we're getting to getting to the Anita Sarkeesians of the world, because reasons. Launched a Kickstarter for a video game project called Tropes vs. Video in Games. That went fine, yeah. It went fine after you and your colleagues shelled so much for the game that it made so much money. That's why. Just kidding. Sarkeesian's Kickstarter went viral, and like so many other feminist critics in gaming before her, Sarkeesian received a deluge of harassment and violent threats that lasted for years. A citation needed. She never went to the police, and one time the police actually spoke out was during her Utah speech. They said there were no threats against her, and one time there was a legitimate issue. Gamergate actually found a guy in Brazil and reported him to the police for threatening her. But this does not get reported by people like her. Sarkeesian received, just as a marginalized gamer could find one another online and make their voices heard, so too could bigoted gamers through shared calls signs of being in favor of Dick Wolves and against Sarkeesian, or even Jennifer Hepler, who was grouped in with a collection of perceived enemies of video games. Bigoted gamers wanted to keep bigoted gamers, according to yourself, had a lot of enemies in 2012, as it became increasingly clear that a lot of different kinds of people could make games. In January of 2012, the release of Indie Game the Movie, a documentary that followed the creators of behind Fez, Braid, and Super Meat Boy, signaled the mainstream of indie games, thanks in the part of increasing availability, accessibility of games, making tools, burgeoning queer indie. Oh my god. Burgeoning queer indie game scene that was growing as well, with several queer and trans women at its forefront. Why does this matter at all? 2012 saw the release of games like Dysphoria, whatever, by Ananthropy, Limb by Merit Kopas, and Howling Dogs by Porpine, and Manichi by Matty Bryce. Although each of these games was different in design approach, they were often described in the same breath as the other. Okay, even if only for the reductive reason that each of had a trans woman as its solo creator. I wonder if the author of this article knows the people involved, and if this is not disclosed, because there has to be a reason why these particular games and these people are mentioned. So I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna continue with the part 2, uncover the rest of the article, because my throat is getting dry and sore. So thank you guys for watching, and see you guys next time. Bye.